It's no secret that the road to WrestleMania 40 feels cursed. Just a month ago, we were talking about how on paper this could end up being the greatest WrestleMania card of all time, and now we have to take that paper, crumple it all up, throw it in the garbage, and get back to the drawing board. Because it's professional wrestling. Injuries happen, real life situations occur, and we have to now pivot and come up with new ideas. Sadly, because of all of these injuries that have happened and all of the changes that need to occur, there hasn't been a person more negatively impacted than Seth freaking Rollins. Because Seth Rollins has been at the top of the WWE food chain for a very long time now, and if you can believe this, he's never had a proper WrestleMania main event. The closest thing was him cashing in the Money in the Bank briefcase at the WrestleMania main event of WrestleMania 31, but he's never been scheduled for his own main event. And the stars had finally aligned. CM Punk was in the WWE, Seth Rollins was a world heavyweight champion. Put them together and you were destined to have a WrestleMania main event for the ages. But alas, with CM Punk's tricep tear, it's really left us guessing who is Seth Rollins going to be facing at WrestleMania now. So that's what today's video is. I'm gonna try and salvage Seth Rollins' WrestleMania main event dreams by giving you some options of who we can have him face off against. I'm gonna tell you right now, the first option you're really not gonna like, but just hear me out. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, ring the bell for notifications if you're a wrestling fan. I know you're gonna like this channel because we upload daily wrestling content. Okay, so before I show you this first one, I really need to preface this by saying that I really like Seth Rollins. I truly love and admire Seth Rollins as an in-ring performer, as a storyteller. However, I feel like I need to care more about the human behind the performer first. You have to remember that Seth Rollins has a very serious knee injury, an injury that under most circumstances would have taken him entirely off of this WrestleMania card. However, instead of deciding to go have reparative surgery, he decided to do rehab so that he could still perform at this year's WrestleMania. And I understand Seth Rollins' motivation here. He had a WrestleMania main event right there for the taking, something that he's never had in a giant marquee match with CM Punk. So I don't blame him for fighting through this so that he can have that WrestleMania moment, because in his eyes and in the eyes of the WWE and in the eyes of many fans, a WrestleMania main event match against CM Punk made that risk worth it. However, that main event is now a complete impossibility because of CM Punk's tricep tear. So because of that, I have to say this, and I have to say this out loud with my first option. I hate to say this out loud, but I think that Seth Rollins' first option for this year's WrestleMania should be no one. Now, I don't want to tell Seth Rollins how his knee is and how his rehab is going. He knows himself, he knows his body. If he feels like he's ready to go, then he should go. But if he was purely risking potentially re-injuring himself and aggravating this injury even more for the sake of having that match, that WrestleMania main event with CM Punk, then if it's not available anymore, then dude, maybe you should go have your surgery and come back fully healed. Again, I really don't like putting this out into the world. However, when I look at the landscape of everyone else that's a possibility for having a match with Seth Rollins, most of the options that I have here just aren't worth a WrestleMania Night 1 or Night 2 main event. And that's the entire purpose of Seth Rollins battling through this injury and choosing to do rehab instead of surgery so that he can have this big marquee WrestleMania main event. But it's just not there anymore. So why risk Seth Rollins for a lesser match than the one that he was originally willing to fight this injury? Again, I ultimately just care more about the individual portraying the character as opposed to me getting a good WrestleMania. So I'm sure he'll make the correct choice for himself and his body and his health. However, I think we need to at the very least consider this. All right, if you're still here and you haven't unsubscribed to the channel because of that first option, then I guess we can carry on. Option number 2 is Cody Rhodes. Now, Cody Rhodes does provide Seth Rollins with a big enough main event caliber superstar to perhaps warrant giving this a WrestleMania Night 1 main event, especially if the plans is to do Roman Reigns versus The Rock. However, I gotta just say what we're all thinking. We have already seen this far too many times. We've already seen it at WrestleMania. We already saw it 2 times after that. It's kind of played out. But I will say that the circumstances are different. This would be babyface versus babyface instead of the traditional heel versus babyface that they had in their original feud. Cody Rhodes is no longer an unknown commodity. He is like the face of the WWE now. And Seth Rollins is a fighting world heavyweight champion. So the context is different enough to perhaps warrant this match. And to be fair, when Seth Rollins confronted Cody Rhodes about how he should pick him instead of Roman Reigns for WrestleMania, he made some pretty darn fantastic points to warrant Cody Rhodes versus Seth Rollins. However, I don't know, man, it just doesn't seem right. I can't even give you a proper reasoning as to why it doesn't seem right. It just doesn't seem right. I'm sure they can build this to the point where we'll all care and we'll all forget about all of this horrible stuff that's happening around WrestleMania soon enough. However, as of the making of this video, I'm just not sold on the idea of running this over and over and over and over again for a 4th time. But it is a fact that that World Heavyweight Championship does feel like the blue collar championship, the workman's championship, and Cody Rhodes kind of represents that. So maybe that is the correct belt that he should be going for. But I know me, you, and many people around the world would prefer for him to dethrone Roman Reigns so that we can bring that WWE Championship to full-time status again. But I will say, this is big enough for a WrestleMania main event, and if Seth Rollins is going to fight through this, and the purpose of him fighting through this is so that he can get that WrestleMania main event, then this is the next best option available in terms of creating a big marquee attraction match to warrant that WrestleMania main event. Because I don't want Seth Rollins fighting through this injury, risking further worse injuries for what? An opening match, a match in the middle of one of the nights? No, like if Seth Rollins is going to endure this injury, it should be for a WrestleMania main event. And I think that Cody Rhodes does supply that star power to warrant that. What do you think? Folks, do you want even more wrestling content? Because I have a Patreon where you get more wrestling content. Patreon.com/SantiZap, where you're going to get the Raw reviews, NXT reviews, SmackDown reviews. You're going to get the monthly mailbag, and you're going to get the Wrestling is Cool podcast 3 days earlier than everyone else. Again, that's Patreon.com/SantiZap. Check the description or the pinned comment. I'm done with the sellout, but go check it out. You might like it, and it helps me keep the lights on and do this as a full-time content creator. Okay, back to the video. Another major possibility here is Gunther, the ring general, as the Intercontinental Champion, going after Seth Rollins. That is a feud that was already laid out in front of us right before the Royal Rumble match. Just the tease of it was enough to get us all incredibly excited. However, if I'm being realistic about the situation, I don't know how we get to Gunther versus Seth Rollins from now to WrestleMania, because the best way to get Gunther to that WrestleMania match with Seth Rollins would have been for him to win some sort of #1 contendership that is presumably going to happen at Elimination Chamber, an event that he can't go to at the very least, presumably because he's having travel visa issues. So if Elimination Chamber as a vehicle, as an avenue to get to Seth Rollins is out of the window, then I don't know what an option is for us to get Gunther versus Seth Rollins. I have another problem with this. Now, I do love Gunther. Gunther is arguably my favorite in-ring worker on the planet right now, let alone just the WWE. The entire planet. I think Gunther is so good and so deserving to have a marquee match at WrestleMania, whether it's for his Intercontinental Championship or for the World Heavyweight Championship. But I have to point out a couple of problems with this. One, what does this do to the Intercontinental Championship status at WrestleMania? This is a big enough title that warrants its own marquee match, its own marquee feud heading into that show. Are we going to have Gunther maybe pulling double duty? Which is a possibility. Like, Gunther is an absolute Terminator. He could definitely do 2 nights of work if he really wanted to, but would that be jeopardizing the quality of one or maybe even both of the matches? The other caveat that we need to think about is, and again, I'm saying this loving Gunther, is Gunther a big enough draw, a big enough star to warrant a night 1 main event of WrestleMania? I would argue yes, but that's because I'm a Mark Loser nerd that really loves professional wrestling, that really adores Gunther. But when you look at this from maybe like a marketing perspective, from a sponsor's perspective, from the casual perspective, do they see Gunther in the same light as CM Punk or as Cody Rhodes? I can't tell you that the answer is yes, because most likely the answer is no. But I know you and I think, yes, he definitely deserves a WrestleMania main event. But, you know, when I'm looking at, I guess from a more casual perspective, maybe not. Also, Gunther would be a very, very demanding opponent for Seth Rollins, an opponent that would put Seth Rollins through the ringer. Is that the guy that we want Seth Rollins to go up against when we know that Seth Rollins isn't 100% there? Again, something else to think about. I like the idea of Gunther taking on Seth Rollins, but I don't know that it meets all of the criteria that we're looking for it to blossom into a WrestleMania main event. I think for the most part, from here on out, you're all gonna go collectively meh. And we start off here with Senor Money in the Bank, Damian Priest. Is there a narrative thread for us to get to Seth Rollins versus Damian Priest? Sure, it's the Money in the Bank briefcase. Is that a good enough narrative thread to warrant risking Seth Rollins all the way up to WrestleMania for him to have a match with Damian Priest? Look, no disrespect to Damian Priest, but I personally don't think so. And how would we do this? Would this be Damian Priest cashing in beforehand, pre-announcing his cash-in, saying, you know what, to me, being in a WrestleMania main event is worthy of me announcing this beforehand. Here it is. I'm cashing in. Seth Rollins, I'll see you at the main event of night one of WrestleMania. I guess you could do that. I don't think that I'm particularly sold by that as a main event, though. And I know you're not either. Even if you're the biggest Damian Priest fan out there, and you know, we love Damian Priest. Damian Priest has been fantastico, tranquilo. But no, frankly, I would much rather see Damian Priest versus R-Truth. And I'm not trying to say that as a shade to Damian Priest. I just think that they have such a good thing going there in terms of a feud and their chemistry. And I wouldn't mind seeing that blow off at WrestleMania instead of just sort of seeing a more or less forced feud between Damian Priest and Seth Rollins right now. Look, I would have liked the idea of this version of Drew McIntyre taking on Seth Rollins in a potential WrestleMania Night 1 main event if we hadn't already seen it twice, and hadn't we already seen Seth Rollins win twice clean in the past 3 months. Seth Rollins beat him at Crown Jewel, clean, beat him at Raw Day 1, clean, beat his team at the Survivor Series War Games. So I don't know, man. I feel like Seth Rollins has already demonstrated that he's far and above Drew McIntyre, at the very least from like a storyline perspective within the world of the WWE. I don't know what Seth Rollins would have left to, I guess, prove to somebody like a Drew McIntyre. However, this version of Drew McIntyre is incredibly good. He's so fascinating, so interesting, so evil, and dare I say, so different than the version of Seth that faced Seth Rollins at Crown Jewel and at Day 1 that it would almost feel like a brand new character altogether in a brand new feud. And we've seen their chemistry. They can put together some very, very good matches. Again, I ask you the question, is this the marquee star power match that could power Seth Rollins to finally getting his night 1 main event? Maybe it's possible. I think that it can be. I think that they can build this to the point where it absolutely can have the legs to be a night 1 main event. But, you know, when it's presented on paper as is without any sort of buildup, I look at it and I go, maybe. I can't even say like confidently, yeah, this is a for sure night 1 main event caliber feud. And again, we kind of just go back to the fact that we've just seen this before and we saw it super recently. There is no doubt that if we were to get a feud between Seth Rollins and Randy Orton, that is a big marquee match, a big marquee feud to warrant a WrestleMania night 1 main event. How the fuck did we get here though? Like, I guess we could do Elimination Chamber, wins a number 1 contendership, and we build from there. However, there just hasn't been enough history, enough anything between these guys in a very long time. We would be really speed running a feud between these two. And also, we're looking at two baby faces right now. Randy Orton, no matter what you do with Randy Orton, no one is going to boo him or dislike him or root against him at this point in his career. And Seth Rollins, your hand is forced. You have to play him as the sympathetic babyface because he's the one that's persevering through this brutal injury to get to the point of having that WrestleMania Night 1 main event. So from characters, I guess we have ourselves a bit of a clash here. I know that this is something that we've seen before plenty of times in the past, but I think it's been long enough where I would be okay with it. All I'm saying is I don't see like logical threads as to how we get there. So sure, I guess we can consider Randy Orton as an option. but I'd be very intrigued as to how we connect the dots and even get there in the first place. Ditto goes for LA Knight. LA Knight versus Seth Rollins. Sure, I'm in here for this feud, but almost everything that I just said about Randy Orton basically fits for a potential Seth Rollins versus LA Knight feud. They're both baby faces. Nothing LA Knight does will make anyone dislike him. He's more or less a forever likable babyface, whether they turn him heel or not. And again, Seth Rollins, sympathetic, fighting through my injury. You can't boo him. You can't have him be a bad guy. So again, we have a clash of personalities. I don't think that's going to work. And similar to Randy Orton, the narrative path to get to Seth Rollins versus LA Knight isn't there, at the very least, not yet. And I don't think that it's something that we can build to with the little time that we have left. But I think we should consider this at some point down the line in 2024. Sami Zayn? Maybe. This is a name that's been kicked around a few times on wrestling Twitter, but I gotta be honest, I still just don't see it. Would it be a good match? Sure. It's already a match that we kind of recently saw. We saw Seth Rollins win clean, and honestly, they haven't really done a great job of building Sami Zayn to being a threat to any of the world champions in a very long time. So would they give this to Sami Zayn? Yeah, but I'm also going to double down and be a little bit mean and say that Seth Rollins versus Sami Zayn is not worth a WrestleMania main event, and it's not worth Seth Rollins fighting through this injury that could get worse. But I feel like we need to at the very least acknowledge the possibility with Sami Zayn being one of the most likable babyfaces, top guys on Monday Night Raw. So from a narrative perspective, he's kind of just a stone's throw away from Seth Rollins. We could make that work. But do we want to make that work? I still feel like we'd be forcing our hand here. You can see that I'm really reaching here. This is how few options Seth Rollins actually has. But maybe Bobby Lashley. He's one of the top guys left over on SmackDown. He's one of those guys that hasn't had a top tier world championship caliber feud in quite some time. We've seen Bobby versus Seth before, but again, it's been a long time. Everything has changed. Contexts are entirely different. So we can make this feel fresh. However, because he's on SmackDown, and again, I'm sort of just repeating myself here, similar to LA Knight, similar to Randy Orton. How do we get there? And again, do we turn Bobby Lashley heel? When we just saw that didn't work. We tried to turn Bobby Lashley heel, but he's too damn likable, too damn cool at this point of his career to boo. So this wouldn't work either. An intriguing option that I saw some of you suggesting is maybe Bron Breakker. However, we would be severely bucking the trend here. I know that we've seen people get catapulted to main event status like super quickly. Like for example, Brock Lesnar, 6 months between debut and winning the WWE Championship. Sheamus, 5 months between debut on the main roster and winning the WWE Championship. If we are seriously thinking of Bron Breakker going into WrestleMania and getting that opportunity with Seth Rollins, I would think it's because we see him winning and walking out as the champion. I doubt we're going to keep the championship on the injured guy that really needs to go have surgery. So we would be saying that Bron Breakker should debut on the main roster and within 2 months winning the top World Championship from Monday Night Raw. That eclipses anything that Lesnar did. That eclipses anything that Sheamus did. However, I will say you are making a giant statement with Bron Breakker if that is what you do. You are telling the world this is not a guy that we're building towards. This is a guy that is already ready made. His call up isn't to slowly build him up. His call up is to tell you this is the next guy. This is the next Roman Reigns. This is the next face of the company. And we're going to tell you in the loudest way possible by having him win a night one WrestleMania main event against one of the top champions that WWE has seen in some time in Seth Rollins. Look, I like the message. I wish if we were going down this path that it was more than 2 months. 4 or 5 is still even a stretch, but it's at least something. We just don't have enough time to make this happen. But if they do this, this would be fucking crazy. And I don't know how I would feel about it. I don't know if I like it or hate it. All right, folks, we're kind of handcuffed here. You got to let me know in the comments section what you think. Was I completely off base by saying, heck, just let this guy go off and have surgery? Or did any of these options really intrigue you as somebody that Seth Rollins should persevere through his awful injury and still, go have that WrestleMania match with? You let me know. That's it. I'm done. Get out of here.